You're listening to the Manifest Your Greatness podcast, and this is episode number 84. Hi, friends. I'm Curtis J. Washington. And look, the purpose of this podcast is simple. We are constantly being bombarded with messages like, we could be happy if only we had a particular thing, or we could be successful if only we made X amount of dollars, or we could be at peace if only so-and-so loved me. These messages are not only disempowering, but also they are simply not true. This is because it's not about where you are and where you want to be. It's about who you are right now and who you wish to become. Once you know what the ideal you looks like, then you will automatically start becoming aware of what steps you can take right now to move in the right direction. And the goal of this podcast is to help you look within and discover all the love, all of the beauty, and all of the unlimited potential that you already possess, and for you to set it free for you and for the world to see. Welcome to the Manifest Your Greatness podcast. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join this episode of the Manifest Your Greatness podcast, where we explore practical and actionable steps to help you manifest the greatness that you already possess deep inside. And today we have a special guest. Her name is Celeste Mergens, and Celeste is an author, speaker, and thought leader, and helps people be the change they want to be in the world. She's the founder of Days for Girls, a global award-winning organization championing women's health and menstrual equity. Days for Girls believes in a world where periods are never a problem and has reached more than 2.9 million women and girls in 145 countries, shattering stigma, shame, and taboos, and turning periods into pathways of healing, new growth, and opportunity. She has been featured in Oprah's O magazine, Forbes, and Stanford Social Innovation Review. She was also awarded the AARP Purpose Prize, Conscious Company Global Impact Entrepreneur Top 10 Women, and 2019 Global Washington Global Hero, as well as Women's Economic Forum's Women of the Decade. Her new book, entitled The Power of Days, a story of resilience, dignity, and the fight for women's equity, comes out this October. Celeste, welcome to the Manifest Your Greatness podcast.
So excited to be with you today.
Well, I just am so excited to be speaking with you again. We had an opportunity to speak prior to this interview, and there's so many things, of course, with the book. We'll definitely get to that as well. So many things that you've been involved in, so many just unbelievably important, critical initiatives around the world. And I can't wait to dive into all of these things that you've just really championed and continue to do so. Helping millions and millions of people, not only women and girls, but as of course we'll get into, the impact of this goes well beyond. And that's definitely one of the things we will be covering a little bit more of today. But it all didn't just happen, of course. With every great leader, there's a story, there's an origin story, and yours is definitely one that I would love to explore a little bit. I do know that you started your life and you grew up from a very young age in transient poverty. And there were some things that happened along the way that were not only difficult to overcome, but also you were able to somehow find strength in your experiences to continue moving forward. But I really would love just to hear a little bit about how was your childhood, first of all, and how did you make it through and find light to continue to follow during such a dark time from when you were so young?
I so appreciate your question, because those moments that something happens to you and you think of them as a really awful thing, and then later learn, oh, actually, that might have been a good thing.
Yeah.
One of those happened when I was young. I was probably 5 years old, and we were without a home at that time, and we were living at a state park at the moment, just in our stop along the way life at the time. And a woman walked up and threw a half-eaten apple into a dumpster near me. And I watched it, and I wondered if I could get in and still get out and not get stuck in there. And just decided I couldn't, because honestly, it's been a little while since I'd eaten, and certainly since I'd had fresh fruit. And I was recognize that feeling, in the back of your neck that someone's staring at you. And sure enough, she was giving me the up and down look. And she said, "Where are your shoes, girl?" And I answered, "I'm toughening my feet." And I remember this because I used to replay it through my head over and over again, because I thought of her as Cruella de Vil from the movie 101 Dalmatians.
Yeah.
And I was so, I just thought, I could see in that moment, almost like a mirror turned around, and I could see that when she looked at me, she saw a dirty, unkempt girl with clothes that were too small for her, and saw me as poor and unimportant. At least that's what I felt in that moment: shame and small. And then a warm assurance filled me that, nah, actually, I'm not that. And in that moment, I wanted to tell her, I wanted to say, I am not what you see. I am not from this place. But she'd already turned and walked away.
Yeah.
And though I used to always think about it as a horrible thing that happened to me, it was only a couple of years ago I finally realized, wow, at a really young age, I got to be asked, are you the homeless girl? Are you the hungry girl? Are you the girl with no shoes, or are you something more? And in that moment, I had this moment of, no, you are not. And I got to call it, nope, I'm not.
Yeah.
And in that experience came the gift that built with maturity over time, to recognize we are not our experiences. We're not anything that happened to us, anything someone labeled us with, anything that we didn't have happen. We are so much more than that. And better yet, it's the paths we choose that build who we are, the choices we make. And that doesn't even count where we land, because that can always change.
Right.
So Leap Forward and my work with Days for Girls has always been about inviting others, always been about what can we do together, and never about, oh, poor you. Because I know with all my being, it's none of us are poor you. Every one of us matter. Every one of us have a reason for our being here. And every one of us can gain strength from the things that happen to us that go on to be the very reason we're really good at something later. And often it's our weaknesses that become our strengths.
Right. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's I think what you said about how our circumstances don't determine who we are. Definitely, it takes a like a lens to kind of see yourself through, to be able to kind of say, yeah, this is happening, but I'm not what is happening. I've got some control. I've got some ability to influence where things go from here. And you had a method, a concept that you called "mind the gap" to heal past trauma. And I was wondering if you could explain a little bit more about what that is.
I'd love to. This is actually recent years that I stumbled on this, and it's proven so effective for me and for others. So the concept is the truth that between the moment that something happens to us and our response is a little gap where we get to choose how we're going to categorize that. Or is it going to be helpful, hurtful? Are we going to be wounded? Are we going to be victimized? Or are we going to be curious about what happens? We have this tiny little heartbeat, and often the determiner of that is the amygdala, the part of our brain that keeps us safe, that gives instant decisions so we don't have to wear our brain out with the minutia. And the truth is that part of us often defaults with a bias to negative because it wants to keep us safe. That's why I call it the lizard brain. It's that part of our brain that wants to just drag us under a rock to keep us safe, but we can't experience much there. So what I learned, and for the sake of time, I'll just explain that what I learned is that we can actually revisit experiences that we've had, or in the moment, choose to just hold it up open just for an extra moment to allow ourselves the time to decide what we want to have happen and how we could interpret it for our good. So, for example, you might be at the grocery store and someone looks right at you and it's a friend and they ignore you when you wave and keep walking. And the lizard part of your brain will go, well, I knew it. We didn't invite them to that thing. And now they're not even talking to me. And our whole brain does this whole story and it gets going pretty fast. And then your heart's like broken over the loss of this friendship, when in reality, just as likely, perhaps even more likely, they just didn't see you. They were thinking about what they wanted to get for groceries that night and didn't even really register that you were there. Right. And then later you find that out. And in the meantime, you used up all this energy with the emotion of loss that didn't even happen.
Right.
Just as importantly, what if they did? They were angry at you. Assuming the worst will not help you to have a conversation that could be crucial to your friendship. Assuming the best, gee, they don't usually act that way. I'm really curious about what might be going on for them. I better make a note to reach out, right? Even if they are mad, you've saved yourself the loss and you have given yourself the gift of curiosity about what could be true. And that will benefit you every time over letting your emotions be hijacked by lizard brain.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I remember just reading in your book about so many things that you took on that you definitely didn't have to. You were very creative and you were outgoing and you were always thinking about what can I create? What can I create? How can I be of assistance? How can I bring a need, to my local community? You were doing so much, and one of the things that just I had to read it a couple of times because I was just like, how I try to put myself in that situation, thinking, okay, I'm doing these things, I'm seeing progress, and I'm seeing what I'm building up start to flourish, and it's growing, and this is great. And then you had the courage to take a step back and say, is there something else that I could be doing that could impact people even more? Is there something else out there that could be calling me to be of service? You know, when you got that invitation to the 2002 World Food Prize, you had so much on your plate, even though you had decided to step away from one of your largest engagements just prior to that. And like you were saying, I mean, so many people could take that and say, oh, that sounds great. I'd love to go, but I just can't. It's impossible. There's just no way. I just can't pull myself away from this. And what if it ends up leading to down another rabbit hole that I can't? I just. Oh, it sounds fantastic, but you, of course, did not do that. You said, This could be a wonderful experience. It could be a wonderful opportunity, even though you have so many things going on. You accepted that invitation, and it drastically changed the trajectory of your life. And I'd love to hear more about how all of that happened and how, with that, I mean, what was that feeling like and how did that experience unfold for you going from all the involvements that you had to letting that door open while another door closed, as you put, and not being afraid to walk through it?
Love this question. I actually have to be completely honest and transparent about this. I was grieved, even though I allowed the door to close and made that choice to close the door for what I was doing before. I was grieved. My heart was like, what did I do? Is there anything I can fix it with? That whole and thankfully I was able to let go. That's so important to get to that point. And then was able to say yes, right? Actually, while the door was closing, this invitation comes in. So what was beautiful about that is that invitation came to me because of a thank you letter. So I had learned about Dr. Pedro Sanchez, the winner that year, and loved that he did of development in communities to think about what they had and what they needed, and honoring their wisdom and their solutions. Things that I could see as someone who grew up in poverty were needed when we build solutions. We got to include everyone in the conversation. Don't assume they don't know. They do know. And have an engaging conversation. I saw that in his development. So I was like, that we need more of that. I want to meet that person. And so I could not find him where he was speaking. And it was on my bucket list, bright and shining and blinking. And I finally decided, you know what I can do? I can write the World Food Prize and tell them how much I love the brilliance of focusing on people who are getting it done and highlighting awareness, bringing a light to that, and creating less hunger in the world. Yes to all those things. And ask them to tell him how much I appreciate the lens he and his team bring to the world. True fan. So I wrote this letter, sent it off, and that was my check. This is what I can do. Imagine my surprise when this envelope comes that is all the things, all the delegates from around the world. Former President Jimmy Carter was there talking about agriculture and about how it helps communities to stand up with them. And all of these people were coming. And then there's this thing, and I thought it was like a conference you signed up for. So I'm looking for a price. There was no price. I call the World Food Prize office and say, I received this packet and it doesn't say how much it is. And she said very formally, there you go. She said, actually, you have received an invitation from the World Food Prize. And I said, yes. She said, then you are our guest. So imagine arriving there, and the flags are there, and the delegates have all their traditional uniforms or traditional wear. And they are, and I'm just dazzled, like, how did we get here? And as I leaned into what they shared and took notes and had comments about the ones that, wow, that's genius. How do we get more of this conversation in the world? Miracles started happening. I can tell you for sure, there's a whole book about it, The Power of Days. When you say yes to the things that your heart calls to, and don't put up all the whys it shouldn't happen, or why you're not the one qualified, or why you're not good enough, or you can't do this right now. When you say yes, miracles happen. And that is just the truth.
Yeah, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more, because it's almost like you're surrendering to the possibility and just letting the universe know, I'm available to do what I can. Let's put results and objectives and goals and all these lofty things we could shoot for on the side, and let's talk about who I am and what I can offer, and just kind of see where it goes. And that's so important. I think one of the biggest obstacles that a lot of people run into when they're trying to start something new is they think about all the things they don't know, and they think about all the things that they'll have to do that they've never done before, some of which never happen. It's funny, we can talk ourselves right out of things without really, really not only with, very much overestimating things, and oftentimes misinterpreting things as well. So we really don't know all of those steps, and to be trying to think about, where do I go from here in some sort of methodical fashion, is so counterproductive, and it's counterintuitive to our creative minds and everything. It's just something that we need to, like you just said, we need to not think about what we can and can't do, but just make ourselves available, and things show up where we can be of service, and then one thing leads to another. And for the 2002, for the World Food Prize, eventually this led to a connection that ended up in another invitation to Kenya. Is that correct?
That's right. Family Foundation invited me to go with them, and I was helping do sustainable solutions, in part the kind of things that I just heard, right?
Yeah.
And before I dive into that, may I just say we're back to mind the gap. Yeah. We're back to, you're speaking to fear, how you have to just, as Elizabeth Gilbert says, have fear, buckle up in the passenger seat, because it's going to be along for the ride. And just know that, you can't touch the the steering wheel, you can't touch even the radio. I got that.
Yeah.
But buckle up because we're going. And I know we're going to be passengers in this ride. You just have to know you're going to feel lesser than, you might feel unworthy, you might feel just what if, but if you just say, fear, I hear you, I see you, buckle up because we're going.
Yeah.
So the thing is, you're right. So here I'm helping a family foundation. Here I am bringing the solutions that I love to find, sustainable, suitable solutions. Ended up getting a master's degree in that. And that was amazing because I had to drop out of college because of personal catastrophe. And then now here I am back with a master's degree, remarkably, and it's the thing I love. And then while doing it, that's when I was introduced to an orphanage again in Kenya, near the slums of Kibera, a place called Dagoretti. And my first impulse, I think I will die seeing children suffer. I know what it's like to go through some of the things they've gone through, but I believe in saying yes. So I went and started helping them have sustainable solutions. And about 18 months later, post-election violence happened in Kenya, which is relatively stable and safe, but 500,000 people were displaced because of an election where people took sides and decided it was a manufactured result, and really war broke out. This battle of wills between parties, and like I said, 500,000 people displaced in a short period of time. And now the orphanage was 1,400 kids. And there I am. We tried to support them, as were others. This wasn't our orphanage, but we were helping when we could. And we sent ahead resources. We were completely out. And then I get a call that they've been out of food for 2 days. I know what that feels like. And I know how hunger tracks back to pain. You can't even think. Your stomach hurts. You just can't even focus to sleep. And I wanted nothing more than to help them. And I couldn't think of a single thing. I hit my knees and was like, tell me what to do. I'll do anything. Nothing came to me. I fell asleep still pleading. And I woke up at 2:30 in the morning with it going through my head. Have you asked what the girls are doing for feminine hygiene? I literally went, because I never thought to ask that question. So I ran to the computer to email, and you didn't expect an immediate answer in 2008 because smartphones weren't everywhere. But I got an immediate answer, and it was nothing. They wait in their room. And that was the moment that I started asking more questions. We created a washable pattern because I knew if we sent money for food, and we were able to raise money for food and disposable pads, but I knew what happens next month. What happens when they have to choose? If they'll choose food, not pads, and we should, and anyone would. So how do you make a solution you could count on month after month? So we made the first washable design, and it was awful, and I could say that because I designed them. And I knew that it had to come with education about what a period is. I asked who was teaching that. They said no one. A terrifying thought to do that myself at the time. We included the community in the instruction, and it was an incredible experience. The girls came up afterwards, and they were holding their kits, and cheers were still echoing off the tin roof. And the first girl said, thank you so much, because before you came, we had to let them use us if we wanted to leave the room and go to class. And I was hoping that didn't mean what I feared it meant. And they later confirmed that they were being exploited in exchange for a single disposable pad. And that was the moment Days for Girls was born. And that moment was about to change the direction of my life yet again. And from that moment, Days for Girls has now reached over 3 million women and girls in 145 countries.
Wow. Well, this, not only the discovery process, just understanding what was missing, then the realization of what was happening, and then, of course, you've got the conflict with this as a necessity versus food. You also have the conflict with what the culture thinks is
Mhm.
normal. Um,
Mhm.
how did the advocacy part of this come together? It just seems like there were so many things that you must have had to tackle in order to make inroads for this.
That's so astute of you because it did, right? And we had to learn how to deliver the education best. And from the beginning, because I included people from Kenya, people from the facility and academy and orphanage itself, and because people support what they participate in, right? People support what they create, as Brendan Bouchard says. And the truth is that to be culturally relevant, we need to ask and include everyone, right? And listen. And often with development and other undertakings, listening to others is the last thing we think of. But in truth, starting there is really wise. And I learned that in part because as someone who was part of communities where I was seen as other, where I was seen, I was stigmatized or on the peripheral of communities for various reasons, I got to see that people don't even see you sometimes. And one of those things was just being a woman. I showed up in engineering and sheet metal and roofing because I like those things and they would pay better for me to help support my family, right? They were just better paid. So I showed up in those places and being a woman, they'd be like, what are you doing here? And so I knew and understand that sometimes you're sat on the sideline and you don't belong there.
Mhm.
Do you know who invented mobile banking? It wasn't, it wasn't like Silicon Valley, like you would expect. It was the Maasai of Kenya. They were using mobile minutes to scratch on, put the code in kind of minutes that they would buy as currency to trade things together because they were getting currency out there was unrealistic at the time. And so they were using it. You know, I'll give you 3,200 minutes for your goat. No, 3,300. Okay. And then they would send it to each other. And the man that started mobile banking in Kenya, in Pesa, saw this, I'm told, and said, we could do something like that. And it wasn't until later PayPal's Jack came in and there was this conversation about, no, we could do this
Yeah.
globally. And so you wouldn't look to the Maasai with the red robes and the beads and the staffs and the and you know stewarding their livestock as the catalyst for something that would become a whole new paradigm in currency. But the truth is we all have a way of seeing things because of our experiences
Yeah.
that are important and because of the way we came, which is unique. And so inviting everybody to share what they see is crucial to really solid solutions. And honestly, I owe that in part to the poverty I was raised in. And that's not to say you have to be born in poverty to create good things. It's to say that we don't have to point to the things that are hard for us as the reason that we cannot succeed. In fact, sometimes they're the reason we do.
Yeah, so true, so true. And exactly like you were saying, this whole idea of the necessity and the, like you said, you would never expect certain things that come from certain places. If you're looking from the outside, you would think, well, that doesn't make sense, but the truth of it is that, like you were saying, these experiences that people have, they shape our perspective, and we see what we want, what we are used to seeing, but we also see what we can kind of compute as an improvement. And I think what you've done that's so amazing is that you had to incorporate all of these different voices, you had to incorporate all of these different systems and all these other logistical challenges, of course, and you had to somehow weave it into their perception as being so critical for everyone to have a better understanding of it. And I know you had, officials involved. And I mean, I couldn't keep track of all the people that you were talking to, but that approach, I was just wondering, just kind of going back to what we were saying about mind the gap. How does that? How did you kind of approach that to kind of pull all of this together to kind of weave this support foundation for this new all of these new things?
So for me, it's about creating a connection. So
Mm,
in other words, first you design a bridge. So to do that, first you think about what would I like to have happen as a result. And
mhm,
you don't make it too large or grand, but think about what would I really can I see happening, and I could be open to even more, of course, but what can I see happening as a result of this connection? What is it that I desire for the outcome? So then you're kind of designing the architecture for your bridge, right?
right,
And
right.
second, you acknowledge that if you're spanning a gap like a giant gulf, and with menstruation, and there's sharks in the water, not because of Shark Week, but because so many people don't want to talk about it. Why? It
Yeah.
connects us all, but it's true. It's one of the world's most prevalent taboos. And so you think about, how do I get over there when there's all this turbulence between us? And so you have to next consider where they might be coming from, being completely aware that you could be wrong, but you do your best to study to know what's important to them. Specifically, what do they value? What would they maybe like as an outcome? And again, holding that you may not have it right, but you're doing your best to kind of do the surveying to know where to connect to on the other side. So being mindful, what did they want? What's important to them? And then come back to the connection point, using what's important to them as the connection for the conversation. So in the case of like female genital cutters that I've had the gift of talking with and having a real conversation about, what if they kept all the rich tradition, but let the cut out the cut,
Mhm,
because women are beautiful and powerful naturally. What if they did that? Not you must because this is awful,
mhm,
not you must because it's against the law, not you must because it was later 2010 against the Constitution in Kenya, but rather, what if you, as leaders that are valued in your community, made this new choice? What
mhm.
would that look like? Because it's not my decision, it's
Yeah.
yours. That when you come from that place and you literally energetically are, what if? And then you wait for them to answer the gap. And you wait for them to say, and then not with your head going, I know what I'm going to say, but
Mhm,
rather, wow, and being curious about what could come of this, being creative with what might react, but really just coming from a place of, I'm interested.
mhm,
That is way more likely to have results. Whereas in the case of most development or even parenting and leadership, it's often looked at as making them wrong. Let me point out where you're wrong
mhm,
so you're clear on that. But
mhm.
the truth is, one, none of us like being made wrong. None of us. So why would we think that it might work in a communication that's vital? And two, um, honestly, if you invite me to do something, I will walk the planet with you.
Mm,
I will do everything I can to be with you and to help. If you tell me what to do, I don't know what it is. I seriously don't, but it's like my toenails turn into talons, and I'm like, don't tell me what to do. And I think that's true for most of us. But if you say, what if,
mm,
now you've got a chance to build something incredible.
yeah.
And I have seen that work all over the world, that it's when you have an inclusive conversation. It's when you decide, like with the Hindu pundits of Western Nepal, where the practice of chapati happens, that they isolate women in a shed, putting them at risk. Just a couple of days ago, another one girl died of a snake bite, I believe it was, in the shed. And they know that that risk is possible, or death from exposure, and it's against the law since 2005. It's a finable offense since the end of 2018, but it persists because they're just trying to protect their family from a misunderstanding that it means that it will curse your family. Someone will be ill. You'll have ill fortune if you're near menstruation or menses, and they're trying to protect their family as any of us would. So when you have a conversation that's not, and we're going to make it against the law, and we're going to punish you, and we're going to, but rather, this is what we teach about the facts of how our body works. This is what menstruation is. This is what we're asking permission to present in your community. And this is a local voice sharing this information. And then you say, what if you ritually cleanse this pad instead of isolating? What if you ritually cleanse that? Could that be a way for you to do this? And I have seen the very people that mandated it stand up for like a half hour to explain that this time had come and that this was a new way it could happen. And Days for Girls Nepal has freed more than 20,000 people from sheds, not by making it a punitive thing, not by making someone wrong, but by saying, what if? What do you think? What do you see? Truly, when we come from building in that way, we don't just mind the gap, we leap it to a whole new possibility, truthfully. And the Power of Days books has a lot of evidence of that.
Yeah, it definitely does. And for the audience, when you said you will go anywhere to help anyone down any road, down any path, um, I mean, this is literal. Definitely, everyone, when you read the book, you will see this. But I could not believe some of the adventures you were describing. Just to get to some of these remote areas, walking on the walking on the sides of what they called hills, but obviously the Rocky Mountains would be probably a good comparison to their hills. But just having to go that extra mile, not only just talking about it from a distance, but battling illness that you had to deal with to get between these locations all by yourself, and just following that calling and that purpose, and then having the awareness and the understanding and the sensitivity to see that, exactly like you're saying, you can make all the rules that you want if it's not something that people believe in, if it's not something that they feel they had a part in creating and that they're a part of the solution. They're going to push back. I mean, we definitely know that with laws here in the United States. They gender equality and racism and things like that. They change the rules, but that doesn't necessarily change the attitudes and change what's really happening at the ground level. It has to be something that everyone can participate in. And I love this quote that you have, where you said that shifts of cultural significance are a dance of culture and knowledge, born of conversations that live on when they are owned and held by those who are within the prisms of the culture itself. And I just thought that was so beautiful and so poignant.
Thank you. Thank you. Because it's really true for all of us, right? It's true in our families. It's true in our cultures. And I think if we could embrace this more, that some of the dangers we're on the horizon of as a species would start to dissipate. I think one of the most dangerous things I'm recognizing right now is the otherness we're doing to each other. This, like, you're in that silo, you're in that silo. You can't talk about this, but you can talk about this, but you can't. And also, I hate this, all of that that's going on. Do you hate this too? Instead of looking at, okay, we're all amazing. We each have different strengths. It reminds me, the possibility here reminds me of the movie Apollo 13, where the NASA, do you remember this scene where they figure out that these are all the things on the capsule right now, and we have just minutes to make this filter fit into this kind of space, a circle into a square, vice versa. And here we have it. We could use that. We are all different. We are all different. How do we come together to make this leap in possibility? And what would we love to have happen? Because thank goodness we're all different. Thank goodness we all have different strengths and weaknesses, and we can lean in where we're strong, and we could honor that we all see different mountains, like it has in the book. We all see things differently. This is good. This is very, very good. But we somehow right now are othering one another for the way we see things differently.
Yeah.
dismissing one another for cultural differences or differences in opinion in
Yeah.
such a dangerous way. When
Yeah.
we really could be going, okay, we have this amazing feat to accomplish. These dangers, let's not focus on the dangers. Let's focus on what do we have to do to make this filter get in this hole. And
Yeah.
let's all of us lean to, because we need everyone at this table. We could be coming from that exciting place, and with resources like humanity has never had before, create solutions no one saw coming if we include everybody at the table, if we stop othering each other and lean in for what we would love.
Yes, beautifully said, and I couldn't agree more. And just like exactly like you were saying about othering, I think many people listening to what we're talking about today may be thinking about, oh, well, we're talking about countries that are far away or countries that have a very different culture. And that's a perfect example of this big misconception, right? Because this issue that you're working so hard to solve and that you're addressing is an issue in the United States as well, right? This is something that you're also addressing here.
100%. What does a homeless woman do? What does a foster girl do? What does a person who has to choose between work and or more fuel in a fuel tank to go to an interview to get work and a pad choose? What is she going to choose? And the truth is that people have to make these choices every day, wherever they live. And wherever we live, we'd rather talk about anything else but menstruation. There is actual data that we would rather talk about a sexually transmitted infection over menstruation. Come on. One of these things connects us all. One of these things is a healthy, natural, amazing part of humanity's cycle of growth and arriving on this planet. What are we afraid of?
Yeah.
What I love most of all, though, is that this is something we can change in our lifetimes right now. We didn't get to be there for the suffragette movement. This one's the equivalent, and we can do it in our lifetime right now. And then by talking about it, by destigmatizing it, by saying, what are we doing? I'm not afraid to talk about it. Let's just not be afraid to talk about it. That's not happening anymore. And then taking action where we can, and then say next,
Mhm.
lean in where your heart calls you. We live in an amazing time, and we have a choice right now to be part of the problem or part of the solution. And I can tell you personally, there is huge joy, huge energy, and huge life transformation in choosing to be part of the solution.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And so much of your message and so much of your approach and of course the accomplishments, all these things, and how people can get involved. So much is covered in your book coming out, The Power of Days, that's coming out this October. Is that correct?
That's right.
All right. Now, what I just you've done so much, and I mean, I looked at so much of and you've done so many things before what you're doing now, and you're continuing to grow. As a matter of fact, I remember when I was getting information, I was like, well, how many women and girls has this organization been able to support? Originally it was 2.8 million when I first started looking at information. Then it was 2.9 about maybe 4 or 5 days before we do this interview. Now it's over 3 million. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you're continuing to do so many amazing things, so impactful. And I was just wondering, what was the impetus to write your book at this particular time? Because you've got all of these wonderful achievements already and so many other things you're working on. What kind of drove your decision to write this book now?
Thank you. I love that you're noticing that. And I want to say that it wasn't the power of me, it's the power of we. It's
Yeah,
the power of so many people coming together wherever they live in the world, standing up. Like that's what it's proof of, the power of we. What happens when we come together? It's amazing. I couldn't do this by myself. I would have sewn a few pads and given a few lessons. It's the power of we. And that's why it's so important that we come together, right?
yeah.
Actually, I wrote this book in planes, no kidding, while they're passing out the water, and in one train, and in hotel rooms, and in my little tiny office at home, and I just kept going. In between things, I would build a little quote, save a little quote here, write notes from a thing that happened here. And I just knew that the stories of those that I was serving with and serving were just so powerful. Their voices needed to be heard. In fact, the first time I wrote it without me in it. And because that's the way I it's very hard to show up and
Mm,
like the publishers are saying, being present in media now and lean forward in your social media. That's so hard for me. It's way easier to tell these amazing stories. So I have a friend that owns a small publishing house, and she said, you know what, I want it to be a big publishing house, but send me things and we'll talk about how the book's coming. So I sent her the story of the apple and the woman and
mm,
how that whole moment that we've shared. And then I said, there I am in Kenya and I'm on the road, on the way to Kenya, and I've got that scene and writing that all up. And so all she replies is, call me. And
mm.
then I call her and she says, uh-uh. I'm like, uh-uh. She goes, no, you don't get to do that. You don't get to go. I'm this unusually gathering leader, a leader that calls people together. And I do things in a really unusual way. And there I am, 5 years and homeless, and then Kenya, you do not get to do that. You have to tell how you got there. And I wrestled with that. And in fact, even weeks ago, when the publisher was saying, how do we write up the little bio on the cover? Are you okay with this? I was wrestling them for, okay, less about me, back off. And also maybe we should just take out the whole part about me. And I said, no, Celeste, no, it's way too late for that. And I had finally decided, however, that in sharing my story and being vulnerable,
Mm,
that maybe people could see themselves
yeah.
and recognize that it's not about you have to be fill in blank here to be part of a movement, and also see that all of us along the road with Days for Girls everywhere literally have been the catalyst for change. It's because we held hands, and to share what it is about my experience and mindset that was really faith-filled, willing to jump in and say, I trust you and I trust you, and we need your wisdom and your wisdom. What led to that assurance that we needed to come together. And so I hope that that's what people get from the book. I really am hoping and praying that people, when they read it, see themselves, see
Mm,
the possibility, and leave with hope. There are some hard stories in this book, but
mm.
I promise they always turn to hope.
Yeah, yeah, it's beautifully written. It is, I mean, there are parts of it that you have to pause and just go, wow, how, and then, it's like this person is still here. They're still doing all these wonderful things. How did they get through this? And I think the vulnerability, exactly like you said, it's so engaging for the reader as well, because there's so many things in there that I think anyone can relate to. You talked about trying to please people. You talked about all of the things that you were trying to do and follow your own interests and how that was looked upon. You talked about all these things, and these are all things that we all deal with. And I think to be able to see it and for you to lay it out there and just to let everyone know, there's been a lot of things that I could have interpreted as, ah, that's it, I'm out. But you you took it and you went, okay, this is not where I want to be, but how can I leverage that? Where can I go from here? Where can I go from here? And then even getting to the part where you started to see some of these, I mean, darkest of dark experiences, and be able to say that you have gratitude for what you've been through, because you can see how it connects and weaves into all that you're able to see and all that you're able to do and appreciate today. And I thought that was beautiful. The book it's coming out in October, and my goodness, I mean, everyone needs to read it. Absolutely, it's a beautiful book.
Thank you. You are one good reader, by the way.
No, this book was fantastic. It's definitely one that is you just can't put down. You're all the different countries that you've been in, all the different experiences, all the different challenges. and all of the hope, just like you said, all of the hope and the vision, and just seeing that we are all capable of doing some amazing things. Just we have to get out of our own way sometimes, right? Oh
That's
man,
the
and
biggest
together.
hurt.
Yeah,
And people have been through far worse,
yeah,
no matter what we've been through, someone's been through far worse. And I'm just grateful that we can lean on each other, that we can see hope. And a lot of people have been there for me along the road, and we can all be there for each other. That matters. And it matters in small ways and big ways, and it all adds up to the potential for big change.
yeah, absolutely true. And where can people find your book, The Power of Days? Where's the best place for them to find that?
Anywhere that a book is sold. So your local bookstore, ask them, please order it. If it's pre-order time, let DM me in some way, because you get some pre-order bonuses. If not, just anywhere you can get it. You can get it online at any outlet that orders or that you can purchase books from. Isn't that wonderful? So anywhere you usually get your books, you can find The Power of Days.
That's wonderful to know. So, and how can our audience get involved and support Days for Girls?
There's so many ways to support Days for Girls. Be part of the advocacy, join a chapter or team in making them, and of course, supporting them financially, following in social media, lots of ways to help them. Just go to daysforgirls.org and pass the word about why menstrual equity matters.
Will do. Absolutely. Well, thank you, Celeste, so much for your time. Before I let you go, we typically end each of our episodes with a challenge of the day. And
Ooh,
yeah, and this is for our audience. And of course, there's so many things that we just don't have the time to cover. You've got so much wonderful advice and so much insight. And definitely, everyone, when you read this book, you're going to come away with so much more. But one of the things I was wondering, you had mentioned that you had some tips for following your purpose, and how to engage right where you are with more joy and energy. And I was wondering if you could share maybe a few of those tips for our audience today.
oh, sure. So the one of those tricks and tips is to find gratitude, right? Find the gratitude of things that are around you right now. So if you have a job, maybe you're not loving it. Maybe it's not fulfilling to you anymore. Instead of jumping out and putting yourself at risk, unless your heart says jump, like right now, then do it. Except for if it's something that would harm someone. But if it's your job, you're like, and what if you held gratitude for the things you can find? Maybe you really don't like it here, but you like your desk and you like that you can have the 5 things on it that you really like. And maybe they don't even allow you to have what you want on there, but you go, but I have the drawer. Find the things that you can lean into with gratitude, because what we appreciates, it becomes bigger. It becomes bigger in our awareness and multiplies. And that's one of them. The other is to pay attention to what you have loved in the past.
Mhm.
So that can be small things. One of my favorite things that I read once in a magazine called Reader's Digest was an Olympian who, from the time he was a very small boy, would jump from the vinyl strip and the metal strip between his grandmother's kitchen and the carpet to try to reach her blue chair. And he would jump as far as he could, trying to get to the blue chair over and over. And he said when he was going for the world record, that as he launched off, an Olympic and world record, as he launched off, he tried to picture everything as light as he could. Airplanes, birds, clouds, hot air balloons. And then he said right before he touched down, he thought he could swear he saw that his grandmother's blue chair.
Wow.
I recognize it's really subtle sometimes, but the things you've always cared about, the things that, just something that brings light to, find those things, lean into the articles about them, just follow that thread a little bit. And if you watch people's stories, often it's back to, I always wanted to write. And here it is all, I didn't get to do that. I'm 61 years old. My first book's being published, right? And it's said that it could be a real change maker. The more people that engage with this book, get this book, talk about it, the more we have more menstrual equity, and we could reach another million girls like that, right? So such important potential, which brings me to another thing. That has to do with how I felt about this book, and I'm going to bring it back to purpose. So the things that you do that are aligned with purpose don't feel like a rock, don't feel like a thing that you're dragging, don't feel like something you have to push uphill. They lift you. You want to get up in the morning. You want to do more of those things. So even though you may have other things going on, go for those things too. Make sure you add them in every way you can, and pay attention, because your purpose is in those things that lift you. Trust that. So as I was writing, or had written this book, and it's coming up, it's so much work to promote the book. And in the case of Days for Girls, a lot of responsibility. I really want people to get the gifts that are in these pages, and for a lot of good to happen, because I really, really want that with all my heart. This to me is my love letter to the world. So I really want that. So I was starting to be a little frenetic about that, frenzied about that. I was really, really like, what else can I do? What else can I do? And then I came to the realization, if it's your purpose, if it's that, if you let go and let God, let the universe, let it lift, then what happens is, instead of you trying to drag it, push it, jump it, you find that it is like, and I all of a sudden could picture that no matter what I do, just like Days for Girls, it won't happen because of the engine of me. It will happen because of the engine of we. People like you saying, read this book. People like you sharing, this is what I found there. And it will be, even if we put them all in a dumpster, the people that needed it would find it. If you trust that, then it's like, I could envision a giant dandelion wisp, and that I'm just holding it. God's the wind to take it where it needs to be. Then take a deep breath, let it go, and watch what happens. Because while we can do everything we can, we should. It isn't because of what we can. It's because we're walking our purpose. It's because of the connections that can happen. And those happen best when we let go. I don't know why that is, but I can promise you I've seen it again and again. So be grateful, watch for the things that lift you, and let go. Say yes, it's coming.
That is fantastic advice, and I hope that I hope that everyone definitely takes that to heart. I think it's beautiful. It is so empowering, and it's eye-opening as well, because these are things that we may just not be paying attention to in our day to day, and it can be so easy not to. But thank you so much for emphasizing those, and thank you so much for everything that you're doing. I am a huge, huge fan of what you're doing, and I will be continuing to follow. And I encourage anyone and everyone who's listening to this or who's had a chance to see this episode, definitely follow Days for Girls. Definitely, definitely, definitely get the book, The Power of Days. It will change you forever for good. And it's a beautiful book. It's a wonderful message. And there's so much in there that we can all benefit from. So thanks again for taking the time, Celeste. It has been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast today.
Loved every minute. Thank you for your invitation.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Manifest Your Greatness podcast. If you liked what we've explored on this episode, then you'll love the Manifest Your Greatness coaching program. The Manifest Your Greatness coaching program is uniquely tailored to help support you on your journey to become the absolute best version of yourself. So if you are committed to taking the steps required to significantly and permanently level up in any area of your life, visit manifestyourgreatness.com/contact. Again, that's manifestyourgreatness.com/contact and schedule your free consultation call today. Talk soon.